Welcome to the first video in my series on the tricks and traps in the Italian game. The Italian game has been played for centuries, and for good reason. It's full of hidden danger. It is a very popular opening, and I highly recommend it to those of you beginning your chess journey. Now let us jump straight into the action. Opening arises after e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, and bishop c4. This is the starting position of the Italian game. Here we can see both sides controlling the center, with the bishop on c4 attacking the f7 square. This is a vulnerable square in black's position for the moment, as the pawn on f7 is only protected by the king. The two main responses here by black are bishop c5, the Yoko piano game, also known as the quiet game, or knight f6, the two knights defense. As mentioned, the f7 square is a key target. The first trap we will look at which exploits this f7 vulnerability is the fried liver attack. This comes from the two knights defense, and is the most famous and aggressive attack from the Italian game. It starts with the move knight to g5. White immediately creates an overwhelming threat against f7 with two attackers, the bishop and knight, against one defender, the king. To stop this attack, black will play d5, and after white captures with the pawn, black will recapture with the knight. This last move by black seems logical and normal. However, this move is a mistake. At first, it looks like white can just capture this knight and black can capture back, and it seems that black is doing well. However, white can play the aggressive move, knight captures pawn on f7, a stunning move. Here the knight threatens both the queen and rook. Therefore, black has no choice but to capture it with the king. As the king is now exposed, white immediately gives a check by playing queen to f3. Inexperienced players will get nervous after this move and try to get their king as far from the danger as possible by playing king to e8. The correct move here is to play king to e6, which we will look at shortly. Now after king goes to e8, white can capture the knight. Here black notices that they can attack the white queen by playing knight to d4. This move serves two purposes. It attacks the queen, and it also threatens to fork the king and rook by capturing the pawn on c2. Here black assumes that the white queen will save itself, whilst also stopping the capture on c2 by playing queen to d1 to defend the pawn. Now since the white queen has abandoned the defense of the bishop, the black queen can now capture it. However, it is good practice in chess to always see what your opponent is trying to do, rather than focusing on your own ideas and plans. Although this plan by black seems clever at first, it blunders to checkmate when white plays queen to f7. Another common mistake beginners make is they try to hide their king by moving it to g8. However, this loses immediately after either the queen or bishop takes the knight on d5. Both these captures lead to a checkmate in 3. Can you see the checkmate for white? Therefore, in this position, the best thing black can do is be brave and use their king to defend the knight on d5. It is advisable never to bring your king into the center, however an exception can be made in this situation. Here we can see that the black king acts as a second defender to this knight. Black hopes to be a piece up. However, we can now add another attacker to this knight by playing knight to c3. The black knight is attacked 3 times and only defended twice. Also note that the knight is pinned to the king by the bishop. Black can add a third defender by moving the knight on c6 to either b4 or e7, with one of these moves being superior to the other. However, it is important to note in this position that black doesn't need to defend this knight, but instead can play the move knight to d4. This move attacks the queen, and at the same time threatens to capture the pawn on c2, therefore forking the king and rook. With this new threat on the board, how should white respond? Feel free to pause the video if you need to. Here it is important not to panic, as a move like queen to d1 stopping both threats would give the advantage back to black. Instead, white should play bishop takes knight on d5, giving a check to the king. The safest option for black is to move their king to d6. Next, white can save their queen from the black knight by playing queen to f7. Objectively, the best move according to the engine is to play queen to d1 to defend the pawn on c2. However, if you are versing a human player, particularly those less experienced, there is a trick behind the move queen to f7. As humans, we are naturally greedy, and so the most common response by a lot of players is to play knight takes pawn on c2, giving a fork to the king and rook, and after the king moves, they take our rook. However, this was part of our trap. Any ideas what white plays in this position? If you said knight to e4 check, congratulations, the black king is checkmated, the game is over. Going back to this position, black can decide not to fork the king and rook, but instead play queen to e7. Now if we try our checkmate, it doesn't work, as the black queen has allowed the king to escape on d7, which, in the previous scenario, was attacked by the white queen. Although black has stopped the checkmate, white is still doing much better here. Next, white can defend the pawn on c2 with the king. Now, although black has this defensive resource after we play queen to f7, you can still win a lot of games this way, since a lot of players will seize the opportunity to give a fork on c2, and then immediately capture the rook. Try this out for yourself, and see how many games you can get this checkmate, particularly under the faster time controls. Going back to this position on move 8, we have seen the rabbit hole of what happens after black plays knight to d4. However, the mainline response here is to defend the pinned knight on d5 by playing knight to b4. You will also see some players play knight to e7. However, knight to e7 is inferior to the move knight to b4. Let us now examine why. If they defend the knight by playing knight to e7, this knight is more passive, and it also blocks the activity and vision of the black queen and bishop. However, if they play knight to b4 instead, this move is more active and is a multi-purpose move. Not only do they defend the pinned knight, but they also threaten to give a fork on c2, as well as allowing the black queen and bishop freedom to attack more squares along the diagonals. It is good practice in chess to do a move which has multiple active purposes. If you can defend and create a powerful attack at the same time, you are living in the best universe on the board. Now, in this situation, the best thing for black to do is castle kingside and finish off development. We don't need to worry about the pawn on c2 for the moment, as the knight on b4 cannot capture it, as it is defending the knight on d5. If they grab the pawn on c2, white now has 3 attackers on this knight, with only 2 defenders. Black's position will fall apart quickly after bishop takes d5, giving a check to the king. If king goes to e7, we have a checkmate. If king goes to d7, the queen can deliver a fork on f5, winning the knight. And if king goes to d6, we can win material or give a swift checkmate. In this position, try and figure out how we can win material or give a checkmate. Let me know what you come up with in the comments below. Now in this position, we have seen the consequences of taking the pawn on c2. What black should do here instead is add another defender to the knight on d5 by playing pawn to c6. The reason for this move is that white is threatening to push the knight away on b4 and then win in a similar manner as previously mentioned. In this position, after pawn to c6, white plays the move pawn to d4, trying to open up the e-file where the king is vulnerable. A tempting move for black would be to counterattack by capturing on c2. With best play, white should be able to win this game. Try this position out for yourself and try to win the game as white. Going back to move 5, to avoid the fried liver rabbit hole, black should play knight to a5 and threaten the bishop on c4. This move leads to an equal position. For those of you new to chess, we generally don't want our knights at the edge of the board, as knights on the rim are grim. They prefer to be in the center where they can maximize their power, but in this situation, it is totally fine. If you've made it this far in the video, thanks for sticking around. Now it's time to test your understanding. In this video, we have looked at a popular attack in the Italian game. Which of the following did we look at? In this position to play the fried liver attack, what does white do? In this position, black has just captured white's rook on a1. How should white punish black for taking their rook? Thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful, please like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. That way you won't miss a thing. Goodbye for now, and I'll see you in the next one.